Hello, this is Kathy Beatty with Divorce Support Anonymous, and I am coming to you live with a dear friend and colleague, an amazing professional who I totally respect, Beth Bolthouse. Good afternoon, Beth.
Hey, Kathy, how are you doing today?
I'm well, thanks. And I'm excited about this conversation. It's going to be varied. We're going to cover a lot of territory in this conversation, but there are critical things that we need to know as we go through divorce, we get out of this negative relationship and start the healing process, which I honestly believe we have to do it intentionally. Correct, Beth?
Absolutely. It's all about intention.
Yes, it is. So let me just give you a little introduction of Beth Bolthouse. She is a licensed professional counselor in private practice now. She has a master's in counseling, a master's in thanatology. She specializes in grief and loss, relationship and boundaries, anxiety, depression, and women's issues. She's also an author of a workbook. She provides classes and one-on-one, so a wealth of information. I'm so grateful to have you here today, Beth.
Thank you for having me. Really looking forward to talking today.
Yeah, me too. So I've got several questions, and they're rather lengthy because I wanted to kind of include a little background with them. So let's start with boundaries, and that's a topic that's on your mind and heart these days, as I understand it. So boundaries are a common term. I know I talk about them a lot in my group, but not all boundaries are the same. There are different types. Can you help us understand them?
Yes, I can. To begin with, I just want to mention that, a boundary is a way we protect ourselves and keep integrity within ourselves. It's kind of like a circle that I put around my life that I get to say who or what gets close to me and what I want to be a part of my life and who I want to be in it. And not just even just who, but even like character traits or, type like respect and kindness, things like that, that I want to be able to have a part of my life, or things I don't want in my life, such as abuse, or neglect or disrespect, or people that are uncaring and unfeeling. So it can cover a lot of things in our life. And actually, I feel like boundaries is everywhere in our lives. We have physical boundaries that relate to space. I and you have the right to determine when, where, how, and who is going to touch us or get close to us physically. Even how close they're going to stand or sit next to us. I don't know if you can remember in your life. I can remember my life, different times I've had to sit super, super close to somebody because the setting was that way and how uncomfortable that felt, maybe a little out of my comfort zone. And it's okay to get up and move, change your spot, whatever we need to do to protect that physical boundary. And then there's social boundaries, and this includes who or what I choose to do or do things with. I can decide who do I want to do things with socially and where do I want to go to do those things. There's spiritual boundaries, and this relates to our belief system. We all have the right to think and believe as we do. We just need to realize that we do have to own the consequences of what our beliefs are, regardless of what they are, but we get to choose that. And then sexual boundaries are about our comfort levels regarding sexuality. We can decide who, what, where, all that we want to have a sexual encounter with. That's up to us. And then emotional boundaries, which really are the basis of all the other boundaries. They are reflective of what we believe about ourselves. And the thing about emotional boundaries is that they actually start out from, birth pretty much. We start to hear things from other people, especially our caregivers, and we start to, embrace the things that they say or don't say, or the messages that we take away from things they say or don't say or do. And so if a child grows up and they receive a lot of positive responses, affirmation for who they are, encouragement to use their gifts, helping them understand their feelings and express their feelings. If they start to feel like they can be who they are and not be judged, then the result is love. And they start to love themselves and value themselves and realize it's okay to be me. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm good and I'm okay just as I am. But for other people, that maybe don't have that growing up, where the negative responses and messages from their caregivers and others are more about disapproval, something's wrong with me. Maybe they're harsh, they're punished a lot. They're told not to have their feelings. They have to bury their feelings. They aren't allowed to be involved in knowing what's going on around them. They're marginalized and disrespected. Then that result is fear. And they start to deny their true self. They're afraid to be who they are because something's wrong with me. I'm not good enough. And that starts to play out over and over in their life. And it's also important to note that even people that grow up in healthy homes where there's a lot of positive type responses, sometimes those people can get caught up in a relationship that's going to give them a lot of negative reinforcement, even in adulthood. And it can cause them to question themselves and challenge those thoughts and feelings about themselves. So emotional boundaries, how we decide our boundaries are really based on what we believe about ourselves. If emotionally I feel like I have a right to be me and I know who I am and there's nothing wrong with me, then I'm going to be more inclined to set a boundary with you that says, hey, Kathy, I'm not comfortable in this situation, or what you said to me last night, it really hurt my feelings and I just want to talk about it, or, anything like that. So emotional boundaries really are the key to whether we feel like we are able to be truthful with ourselves and also truthful with others in a respectful way. And the other important piece of this is a lot of times we feel responsible for how someone else treats us. We feel like if something happens, like, if I'm at the store or at church or somewhere else and someone that I've known for a while, they ignore me. Maybe from their standpoint, they're walking around, their mind's on something else. They don't even see me, but I see them and they don't say hi. I might internalize that and think, oh my gosh, what happened? What did I do? Did I hurt them? Instead, we start to project, I must be responsible for how they treated me. I must have done something wrong. When in reality, taking things at face value, we don't really know what's going on with them. And really, we're not responsible for whether they say hi to us or not. And if we didn't do anything to hurt the relationship, we should be okay. But instead, we have a lot of self-doubt. So we're not responsible for how others treat us, and we're not responsible, or we are responsible for how we treat others. But we have to really be intentional, which is that word that you used, about what we choose to think and what we choose to dwell on.
That is so basic. And yet I know many of the people that I work with struggle with those basic emotional. And that's because sometimes of expectations of other people that they have put on their life. And it's a new day, and it's a new process of learning. How do I figure out who I am without people's expectations and develop these boundaries that make me comfortable and allow me to maneuver and be empowered in my own life?
Yeah. And I think part of it too is, we don't know what the truth is about ourselves because we've believed the negative lies for so long. And that's a common question that people in my groups and people in, that I do therapy with will ask, well, how do I know what the truth is? And, I can tell you that it's not the truth, but you have to start deciding if you're going to choose to believe. And my response usually is, but what if it is the truth? What would happen if you really started to say, maybe there isn't anything wrong with me. Maybe it is okay for me to have this feeling. Maybe I am smarter than I've always believed I am. Maybe I am a good friend after all, and start to really, challenge that thinking. One of the women in my boundaries group likes to use the phrase, what is the evidence? I love that, because what is the evidence that you're not okay? What is the evidence that you're not smart? What is the evidence that you're not a good friend? And if you can't come up with evidence, then maybe you need to start rethinking what you're thinking about yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, second question. There are relationships and/or relationship patterns that make it challenging for us to set boundaries. What are some of those relationship patterns to watch out for?
Oh man, one of my favorite authors, I'm just going to hold up his book, and he's like the boundary expert. You all probably heard of him. Dr. Henry Cloud and John Townsend, their book Boundaries is fantastic. He's got a Facebook page. He does a lot of live, like little mini Facebook videos every week. And his book unpacks a lot of this. So I'm just going to borrow from him. And the unhealthy people that we tend to encounter, first of all, we need to look at ourselves, because a lot of us are compliant people, and we also encounter compliant people. And compliant people don't feel like they are able to say no. They don't feel it's okay to say no. Instead, they feel like they have to please everybody else and say yes to anything, whether it's good for them or not. And so if we are, for instance, trying to set a boundary with someone who's compliant toward us, we have to keep in mind that they're probably going to agree with us just to keep us happy and not to be disrespectful to them, because they need to start to have their own sense of self and sense of respect. And to also make sure that our relationship is not about getting my needs met because they're so compliant. But secondly, if I'm the compliant person, learning how to say no and not feeling like I have to justify it. It's okay to just say no. No is a complete sentence. And saying, I'm not sure, I'll have to think about it, I'm not interested. The other piece of that is not letting guilt or false guilt take you into a rabbit hole so that you will say yes. Because most guilt that we experience is really false guilt. And false guilt is usually about regret. And so if I have false guilt, I'm going to think, I wish things could have been different. I wish I could have done more. I can still say no. But if I start to go down the rabbit hole of guilt, then that takes me into a spiral of, I must do everything I can to make this person happy. And true guilt is really about causing harm to someone, which I think most of us, most of the time, we don't want to do that. So if I can honestly say, I haven't intentionally hurt them, and it's okay to say no. I just wish maybe I could do more, but I still have to say no. That's really about regret. So don't go into the guilt rabbit hole. The other piece of this, a lot of times people that don't respect our boundaries, especially if we're more compliant, people pleasing type of people, they're going to want to know why we say no. Oh, why? Why can't you do it? Why won't you do it? Really? No? And it's okay to just then turn it on them and ask them a question. Well, why is that important to you? Why do you need to know that? Because they really don't. It's okay for us to not even give an explanation. And I have found in my own life, whenever I say something like, let's say a friend calls me up and says, hey, can you do this? And I say, no, I really can't. They'll try to come up with a way that I can. So using more assertive language, like, I'm not going to be able to, that won't work for me, things like that, and being more specific that way, and not feeling like I have to give an explanation is also important. And it's part of preserving my own integrity and being true to myself and not being just compliant just to please somebody else. So that's one type of unhealthy person.
Yeah, Beth, what I really appreciate about what you're saying is you're asking us to live authentically and honestly.
Yeah.
And that, wow, how many of us have struggled with that because we're wanting to please other people or we're wanting to meet those expectations, and yet it's dishonest.
Exactly.
And it's so much more energy other than.
And think about not only the physical and emotional energy, but the mental energy of, how many times in my life I've said no, and then I like rehearse it in my mind, like for hours later, like, oh my gosh, I hope they're not upset with me, and all that stuff. And I've had to really learn over the years and really train myself to not feel guilty and not feel bad when I legitimately have to say no to somebody or even change plans or something unexpectedly, because things happen. And it's hard to say no, but the other piece of it is that if we're not going to be honest, then we're just being fake, and we're really not only disrespecting ourselves, but I think we also do a disservice to the other person, that we don't value them enough to be honest with them. And some people won't like it. Some people will get upset and may not want to have anything to do with us anymore, in extreme situations. And you know what? That's okay, because maybe they are not the right person for me to be in relationship with anyways. And they have their own stuff, their own boundary issues that they need to work through, and I'm not responsible for those. They are, but I can still be true to me and do it in a respectful, kind way too.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. So I want to talk about gaslighting. This is
Oh,
a term we hear quite a bit, and I've been gaslighted in the past, and I know how painful it really, really is. But how can we identify when someone's gaslighting us, and how can we respond to it in a healthy, honest, authentic way?
well, the term gaslighting came about back in the 40s. A man named Patrick Hamilton wrote a play called Gaslight, and then there was a movie with Charles Boyer and Ingrid Bergman that came about. And I don't know if anybody watching has seen that or not. There's clips on YouTube and different things, but it basically is about a woman who marries a man that murdered a woman upstairs in their attic, and she doesn't know anything about it. And so he realizes that that woman that he murdered, there were jewels up there. So every time he goes up in the attic to search, he turns on the lights. Now their lights back then weren't like ours. They were gas lights. And so every time he turns the gas lights on up in the attic, the gas lights on the main floor dim. And his wife's noticing this, like, wow, that's so odd that these lights are going off, because she has no clue that her husband's up there, right? So he comes in the setting later, and she's like telling him, man, these lights are going on and off. I think there's something wrong. He's like, oh, there's nothing wrong. You're just imagining it, and gradually over time, he starts to convince her using lots of different language that not only is she imagining the gaslights, but she's imagining other things. So he starts to rewrite the story for her to the point where he starts to try to convince her that she's actually insane. So that's where the term gaslight comes from. And so when we look at gaslighting as something people do today, it's first important to distinguish that some of the things that gaslighters do, I mean, everything they do is gaslighting, but not everything other people do is gaslighting. There are people that are going to try and control you that really aren't gaslighting you. They're just trying to control you. They're trying to get you to change something. But people that are using gaslighting, it is really a covert, subtle type of emotional abuse. They will mislead you many times over. They will try to recreate the story and start to get you to really doubt yourself and doubt whether what you know to be true is actually true. They'll start to make you think that, okay, maybe I imagined this, or maybe I am crazy, or they'll start to call you, you're too sensitive, or wow, you're really being defensive all the time. And they start to really question yourself, question your judgment, question your memory. They'll make you doubt yourself and your own mental health. They'll tell you things like, oh, you're remembering things wrong, or you need help, you're imagining things. Oh, there you go again, you're overreacting. Things like, you sound so crazy, stop feeling sorry for yourself. Even to the point maybe where they'll say something and you're like looking at them and they're like, oh, I was just joking. And different things like that can all be a part of the gaslighting process. And the thing that's really important if we're dealing in a gaslighting situation is that that's why the emotional boundaries are so important. We have to really know ourselves and trust ourselves, and know that I can value my own opinions, and I can know that what I believe and what happened to me is true. That if someone else tries to convince me that I didn't see or didn't experience something, but I know I did, I have to really start to value my own insight about that. And if someone starts to doubt me, try to convince me that I'm imagined something, that's a huge red flag that I maybe am being gaslighted by this person. And whatever the reason is, they have their own intention, of course. But then I have an opportunity to set a new boundary. And maybe I need to pull away from that relationship. Maybe I need to leave where I'm living, because if I'm living with someone that's like that, it probably may not be safe for me. So there's just lots of different boundaries that we need to engage at that time. And some of them are challenging and risky and scary. We don't know what that person that's really trying to gaslight us might do or what they're capable of. We do also struggle with believing we're being gaslighted, because if we love someone, we just can't believe they would do that to us. We tend to take the blame, and then we feel the false guilt way too easily and make excuses for them. We ignore our gut feelings because we've convinced ourselves this is the person I love, they love me back, and we start to ignore all the red flags. We think, oh, if only there's something I could do to change things, then that person wouldn't feel that way. And then as soon as we change something, we get it again in a different way, maybe. I think sometimes we've allowed ourselves to be mistreated so long that we don't recognize it anymore, and until it's really too late. And then what do we do? And it can be really, really challenging. Um, People that are gaslighting us, they want things their own way. And part of that is really manipulating us for their own purpose. But like I said, it's important to distinguish whether someone's just a controlling type of person and whether they're truly, truly gaslighting us.
And I think you give really good information as to why people should be seeing a therapist or in a support group to work through these things, to hear other people tell their story and say, wow, it's not just me, I'm not crazy. It's so important, again, with your intentional healing, that you step into a therapy situation or you step into a group so you can begin to hear your own voice.
Yeah, absolutely. And be validated by people that really are for you. Which leads me to talk about the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
The imposter syndrome is really believing that we're not as competent as as other people might think we are. Feeling like I'm phony, or maybe people won't think I'm smart. Usually maybe I do something really, really well, but then I find fault with it within myself, a lot of self-doubt. And actually, there are 5 different types of imposter syndrome. There's the person that is like superhero, who overworks themselves because they try to make up for how inadequate they feel. Someone who's the perfectionist, they're never completely happy. Instead, they focus on the flaws instead of the strengths. The person that is a natural genius who sets exceedingly high goals, but then when they can't meet one of them, they feel very crushed, and it depresses them and demoralizes them. There's the expert. All these are kind of labels in the imposter syndrome, if you Google it, where they're never satisfied with their level of understanding. They're constantly trying to learn more, to be more, because they inside just don't feel adequate enough. And then the soloist, who would rather do everything alone than ask for help, because they don't want anyone to think they're incompetent or stupid or anything like that. And the thing that's so important about the imposter syndrome is when you think about being gaslighted and how it causes us to doubt ourselves. And I started thinking about, how does being gaslighted correlate with the imposter syndrome? Well, it causes us to question ourselves and doubt ourselves, and then we really don't know who we are. And it doesn't have to be specifically gaslighting, but I think, again, it goes back to those emotional boundaries, how we formed our core beliefs about ourselves, and we form those avenues of self-doubt and low self-esteem and something's wrong with me. And think about how society views women oftentimes. Our roles are less than often than others. The expectations people have, a woman who's really assertive maybe is viewed as in a negative way. There's lots of stereotypes. Religion has also contributed to this. When I was growing up, a woman's place was in the home. Don't work outside the home. That was really looked down upon. And, just different stereotypes. And it could go the reverse way too. I mean, there's just lots of different ways that unpacks itself. And even like in the medical community, I've had times when I've gone to the doctor and not been believed about my symptoms, and I've had to almost really advocate for myself to find somebody. And I hear that over and over, and it just makes you doubt, well, I know this is real, but maybe I am making it up. Maybe it isn't that big of a deal, but yet I know it is, and you start really going that back and forth. And the other piece of this is, I think we gaslight ourselves. We feel like, oh, I'm just being too sensitive, maybe I'm not as good as that other person. I need to do more to be just like them or as good as them. We minimize our own achievements and accomplishments. We doubt our own reality. We think, well, what happened to me wasn't as bad as this other person, so I guess I shouldn't worry about it. And we start to also internalize negative feedback from other people instead of asking ourselves, what is the evidence that that's true? And so that's another piece of the whole imposter syndrome, and how, it kind of goes hand in hand with all of it, the emotional boundaries and, the gaslighting techniques that are used by others toward us to control us and manipulate us, and then how we turn that on ourselves too.
Yeah, yeah. I was doing a presentation a few years ago, and I was looking up Audrey Hepburn, and she had incredible insecurities. Now, for those of you who are younger in the audience, you'll have to look up who Audrey Hepburn was, but she was absolutely gorgeous, talented, a star, amazing. And yet her son talks about her incredible insecurities. And I thought, if Audrey Hepburn can be insecure, I can be too. And we all can be, because no matter what achievement, and I'm so guilty of this, no matter what achievement, we just look at, oh, it could have been better. And we critique ourselves instead of saying, wow, enjoy, celebrate the accomplishment that you have done. But
Yeah.
we're very hard on ourselves.
Well, and think about, I mean, I can remember being told when I was a child, oh, don't, like really being proud of myself in a good way, and then being told, well, don't think too highly of yourself,
Yeah.
and I think the intention was they didn't want me to be prideful. But the downside was, because I wasn't getting the affirmation I felt I needed and wanted by the teacher or whoever it was, um, I then internalized it in a negative way. Oh, I guess I'm not, I shouldn't feel proud of myself. And so then that takes me down a path of, well, maybe my accomplishments aren't that big of a deal, and that's all a negative focus that gets embedded in our brains, and it's really hard to change. But there again, I wanted to talk about, and you and I talked about, the whole, our thought patterns too, and changing the way we think. We all have those automatic thought processes, the automatic negative thoughts. When something happens, we go right to worry and anxiety, which is all fear-based, and get all stressed out trying to figure out a solution. And then we start to get more upset and concerned and scared. And then that leads to more anxiety and feelings of self-doubt. And then we end up really depressed and moody and, live in fear for the most part. But if we can start to turn that around, and when something happens or is said to us, instead catch ourselves, I'm going into worry. Okay, wait a minute. How can I go into the truth? What is the truth about me? What is the evidence that I can't figure this out? And how can I take that truth of the situation and feel my feelings, but still start to look at it in a more calm, composed way, and then start to feel more confident and come up with a solution or come up with a response or a boundary, whatever it might be. And then I end up starting to feel less fearful, more serenity, and even become more joyful about me and my life, because I know I can handle whatever comes my way. And, we talked before, you and I, about Romans 12:2 says, be transformed by changing the way you think. God doesn't say, okay, the only way you're going to get through life is by making sure your feelings line up with this level of happiness. That is not what he said. I mean, we can look all through scripture and see all the different ways God affirmed people's feelings, but he really nurtured them through their feelings. But it was really about them looking at the truth and changing the way we think. And what am I going to focus on? My feeling is worry, but my focus can be Christ, and knowing that I can trust him no matter what. My feeling can be fear, but my focus can be, talking to you today, for example, every day and I still do it too. I have to fight that, feeling of, oh my gosh, what if I don't know what I'm talking about? What if someone's watching and they think, oh, what is she saying? She should say this, and I have studied this, and no, I'm not the expert. I haven't arrived by any means, just because I even had to go through this process today intentionally in my head of rechanging my thoughts and knowing that worry, yes, I feel anxious a little bit maybe, but it's going to be okay. We're talking about things I know and trust, and I can do this, and just re-engaging the truth about me, and affirming myself, giving myself that affirmation and encouragement and the emotional support that maybe I didn't get, If we can do that, become our own best parent or teacher, or our own best self to ourselves, that's really, really important and really key.
A scripture comes to mind that when Jesus said the truth will set you free. And
Yeah.
I wonder about when you're talking about renewing your mind, if that was part of it, that we could live life out of our head and that we could be free, and knowing that we're okay with God and that God's got our back and we're not condemned. Romans 8:1, we're not condemned. So go live life, go live in love. And yet we continue in this, in our head, and all of these anxieties and imposter syndrome, and all the while life is passing us by and time is moving forward. Another reason why it's so intentional to get healing, to find the truth, and to begin living life in love instead of in fear and worry.
Well, yeah. And the important thing is, though, we don't want to deny our feelings. It's so important to acknowledge, how do I really feel? Because if we just deny our feelings and go with, well, I'm going to choose to think this, but I'm not going to let myself feel anything, then in some way we're sabotaging ourselves too, because we're stuffing our feelings.
Right.
And I think if we don't acknowledge our true feelings and then choose what we're going to do about it in our minds, then all we're doing is creating a huge volcano that's going to explode at some point, because we're kind of faking our way through life. And I think on the one hand, yes, you kind of do have to fake it till you make it type of thing. But on the other hand, we have to acknowledge how we feel, that we are upset, we are mad, find a safe way to vent, find a trusted person to talk to process your feelings, use a journal. One of my favorite things to use is a feeling word list. And, just go down through there, check what are the things I'm feeling, because it gives me other words besides the common, mad, sad, glad, happy type of things. Maybe I feel cheated. Maybe I feel disappointed. Maybe I feel, really concerned, just all those different types of words that you can start to identify, and then choose your thoughts. Okay, this is how I feel, but what am I going to put in my head? What is the truth about me and about what I believe that I can use to get through the situation, even while I'm feeling these things, so that the feelings don't take control. Instead, I am the one in control.
I love it. It is such a process. Yeah, absolutely. You have to identify, and that's living in truth as well, isn't it? When we admit this is how we're feeling. And I totally get. And another reason why support group and therapy is so helpful, because you
Yeah.
have people who can articulate what you're feeling that you couldn't find the words for. And when you do find the words, you feel empowered to begin to understand it and to change it.
And acknowledging our feelings, think about it. So often, I think everyone goes through this in life, and especially when we're younger, and I think our caregivers had good intentions. They don't want us to be upset. They don't want us to be sad. Oh, don't worry, everything will be fine. Oh, don't cry. I'll get you another puppy. Don't be sad. I'll buy you another bike. And so what do we learn from that is I shouldn't feel my feelings. And then we don't know if it's okay to feel our feelings. So us being the best nurturing caregivers to ourselves by allowing us to have our feelings, knowing the feelings are okay, but that doesn't mean that you can't still choose what you're going to do about a situation or how you're going to process something. It's really important. And one of my favorite quotes is from Daniel Green. I found it years ago on the internet, and he's a psychologist, and he wrote, "I am responsible for how I treat myself and how I treat others." Boom.
Yeah.
I am not responsible for how others treat me, how others treat others, or how others treat themselves. My only responsibility is to myself, what I put in my head, what I put in my heart, how I identify myself, how I draw my boundaries, how I choose the choices that I have, and then also how I treat other people. Am I going to be kind and respectful and truth telling? That's all I'm responsible for. I can't make anyone do anything. I'm not responsible for them. So if someone is negative toward me, you know what? I didn't cause that. You didn't either. That's on them. That's their pain and their wounds and their stuff that they're working through, not mine. Because, we have enough of our own stuff. We can't own everybody else's we can't fix other people. We can only work on ourselves. So that's another really important thing to remember in all of this.
I love how you empower people with your classes, with your counseling. So talk to us about what opportunities you offer to folks and also your workbook.
Yeah. I do therapy. I'm in private practice and I take almost most insurances, and I'm in Michigan. So if you are in Michigan, living in Michigan, or if you are, anyways, that's where my license is. So I unfortunately can't work with people from other states, but I do offer groups. I'm doing a boundaries group right now, and then I'm hoping to do another one in the summer. I also wrote a workbook, and actually that group, once I get done with this particular group that I'm doing now, because like I was telling you earlier, I developed the material, I want to say it was at least 10 or more years ago. And I taught a lot of different groups over the years, boundaries groups, and every time I always add more material to it. So this year, when this group is done, I'm going to be putting it together in written form, so that you'll be able to buy a workbook and work through it on your own. And I know there's a lot of different boundaries, but workbooks out there. I come from more of a counseling orientation with activities that hopefully will help give you more insight. And that was also what I used in this workbook, From Loss to Life, How to Transform Your Life After Traumatic Loss. And I do talk about some boundaries in here because that's another important part of figuring out your life when you've been through something traumatic. It also helps you start to identify, what were the patterns in my life growing up? What were the toxic experiences I had? What are some of the things I need to change about my beliefs? How can I challenge those beliefs? How can I start to identify healthier relationships and find purpose and meaning in my life? So you can get it on Amazon. It's called From Loss to Life, and How to Transform Your Life After Traumatic Loss.
No, Beth, your classes, though, I'm assuming they're Zoom. So you don't have to be in Michigan to take your boundary classes, correct?
Uh, that I'm not sure how that plays out because it is more psychoeducational. I think that it would be okay to be in another state because I'm not billing insurance, and it's not a therapy group. It's more an educational type of group. So yeah, they are on Zoom, and I love that because, you don't have to, you can be comfortable in your own home and you don't have to drive anywhere. So yeah, but as far as I know, it is okay for people from other states to join a psychoeducational group.
Good. And how would people contact you about the class or for counseling?
You can get a hold of me on psychologytoday.com. I have a profile there. You can email me, bethbolthouse@gmail.com, or find me on Facebook. I have a professional page. You can always message me through there. Text me, call me. My phone number is on that page. So
Awesome. Thank you. I met Beth many, many years ago. She was leading one of my counseling classes, and she is phenomenal in working with groups, and I'm sure one-on-one as well. In fact, I know she is one-on-one as well. So if you find yourself needing some of her services, don't hesitate. Life's too short, and to work through all of these issues so that you can live a life that is free and living in love instead of fear and worry and all the other things that could mess up the mind. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Beth, thank you so much for being here and
Oh,
having this.
welcome.
Yeah, what a great conversation. There are topics here that are essential for us to know for our continued healing. And so I appreciate you. I appreciate your heart for people, people who are grieving, people who are searching. I appreciate you very much, Beth Bolthouse.
Aw, it's so great to see you again, Kathy. And you're a dear friend too, and not just a colleague. And I am so glad that we got together today. I know everything we touched on was really kind of touching on it quickly, but hopefully folks will consider the group or message me, whatever I can do to be of support.
Awesome. Yes. And for some, it may be the first introduction to these concepts. So good stuff. Thank you. And again, this is Kathy Beatty with Divorce Support Anonymous, and make it a great day.